The Great Question. Imagine waking up one day to realize that everything you've been taught, every belief you've carried, every aspiration you've chased, was never truly yours. That the goals you've been sprinting toward like a dutiful machine were quietly installed into you, not chosen by you. That your dreams, your sense of success, your image of happiness were drafted not by your soul, but by the soft, invisible hand of something much larger. Not a tyrant in the street or a dictator on a stage, but a quiet puppeteer hiding in the culture you breathe like air. Would you dare peel back the layers and see who's really pulling the strings? There's a reason most people don't. Because thinking too deeply is dangerous, not to you, but to the world around you. Society doesn't crumble when people fail. It crumbles when people begin to see. When they start asking questions no one wants answered. What if the life you've built is a cage decorated with the illusion of choice? What if your confidence was only ever conformity in disguise? What if your opinions, even your rebellions, were carefully curated reactions manufactured by the very machine you believe you're resisting? Pause. Breathe. Let this in. From the moment you were born, the world began whispering in your ear. Whispering who you should be, what you should fear, who you should admire, and what you should chase. It came in lullabies and commercials, in textbooks and timetables, in likes, shares, slogans, and report cards. It came gently, sweetly, with promises of belonging, until one day, without realizing it, you began to confuse that voice with your own. But whose voice is it really? That voice tells you to be productive when your soul cries for stillness. It tells you to chase success even if the chase hollows you out. It tells you to be normal even if your truth is strange and untamable. It teaches you to fear as solitude, to numb pain, to silence questions with convenience. It rewards obedience with comfort, but punishes curiosity with alienation. You are free, it says. Just don't think too much. You are independent. Just follow the script. You are special, just not too different. But here's the paradox. The freer a society claims to be, the subtler its prisons become. In places where overt control would spark revolt, the system opts for a sweeter poison, one that tastes like ambition and smells like opportunity. You think you're choosing, but you're reacting. You think you're expressing, but you're imitating. The cage isn't iron. It's made of praise and paychecks, convenience and compliments. The chains are psychological, and they tighten every time you trade your inner voice for external validation. Ask yourself, when was the last time you had an opinion that cost you something? When was the last time you followed your truth, even when it made you seem irrational, difficult, or wrong? When was the last time you were free enough to risk being disliked? The truth is, society doesn't want you to think like this, not because it fears your mind, but because it fears your independence. A thinking person is unpredictable. A self-possessed human doesn't buy what they're told to want, doesn't bow to manufactured norms, doesn't play the game just to be accepted. And that kind of person? They can't be marketed to. They can't be manipulated. They can't be used. But society thrives on predictability. It's built on algorithms of behavior, patterns of thought, masses that move together in controlled chaos. If too many people begin to think for themselves, truly think, not just echo approved dissent, then the entire machinery trembles. So instead of chaining your body, it chains your beliefs. Instead of burning your books, it distracts you from ever reading them. Instead of silencing you, it rewards you for talking, but only within the walls it built. And most terrifying of all, this system doesn't need to be enforced. It sustains itself because we enforce it on each other. We shame those who diverge. We mock the ones who feel too deeply. We call the thinkers crazy, the rebels lazy, the loners dangerous. Not because we're evil, but because deep down, their freedom exposes our own imprisonment. Their courage reveals our own compromise. So here's the question that cracks the foundation. What if your entire sense of self has been shaped by forces you never chose? And if that's true, Who would you be without them? The hidden problem. Its psychological, philosophical roots. There's a peculiar kind of blindness that plagues modern life, not one of sight, but of self. It's the quiet amnesia of forgetting how much of you was given to you by something else. The values you hold, the routines you follow, the very structure of your days. They didn't rise from the depths of your soul like spring water from a hidden well. No, they were laid like bricks, one after another, by parents, teachers, media, institutions. And over time, those bricks formed walls, thick, comfortable walls you learn to call identity. But there's a cost to this construction. As Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And in our time, few things are more unconscious than the societal scripts we live by. Let's peel the skin back further. Society is not an evil overlord hiding in a bunker. It's not a villain in a mask pulling levers of mass manipulation. No, it's more insidious than that. Society is the collective expression of billions of unexamined assumptions. It's a feedback loop of conformity, a mirror that only reflects what everyone else is already doing. And when everyone follows the same illusions, those illusions begin to look like truth. Arthur Schopenhauer once observed that the greatest of follies is to sacrifice health for any other kind of happiness. Yet look around. How often is success pursued at the expense of peace? How often do people trade vitality for status, relationships for ambition, truth for popularity? It happens every day because the deeper disease is hidden beneath the surface. Most people are not driven by what they love, but by what they fear. Fear of rejection, of insignificance, of being alone, of being labeled different. Society has mastered the art of weaponizing these fears into rules. Be agreeable, stay productive, follow trends, don't stand out too much, don't go too deep. The result is not totalitarianism by force. It's self-policing by insecurity. It's the mass adoption of comfort over clarity. And what's worse, we've built entire industries that capitalize on that fear. Social media doesn't just amplify our voices, it conditions them. It doesn't just show us the world, it filters which parts we're allowed to see. You become what the algorithm rewards, and before long, you start optimizing your soul for engagement. But what happens to a person whose inner compass has been overwritten by the loudest voices outside them? What happens when your dreams are really someone else's marketing campaign in disguise? Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and existential psychiatrist, said, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. And isn't that what we're doing, scrolling, buying, numbing, performing, just to avoid facing the empty space where our real self should be?" This is the root of the hidden problem. You're taught to mistake noise for wisdom, speed for progress, achievement for purpose. And when your soul rebels, when anxiety rises, when depression knocks, when exhaustion smothers, you're told to silence it with medication, motivation, or mindfulness apps. You're told to stay positive when your psyche is begging you to go deeper. But those symptoms are not malfunctions. They are messages. Your mind is not broken. It's resisting assimilation. Jean-Paul Sartre believed that human beings are condemned to be free, that we must invent ourselves moment by moment in a world without given meaning. But the modern world hates that idea. It doesn't want you to invent yourself. It wants you to consume an identity, wear it like fashion, swap it out seasonally. Authenticity is risky. It cannot be mass-produced. It refuses to obey. And that brings us to the philosophical wound at the center of this crisis. We've confused integration with obedience and self-awareness with self-help. True self-understanding isn't about hacking your habits or boosting your productivity. It's about confronting the contradictions within you, the primal and the spiritual, the light and the shadow, the conformity you perform and the chaos you secretly crave. Jung's concept of the shadow is essential here. He believed every human has a dark, unacknowledged side, one that contains not just evil but raw power, repressed desires, unrealized strengths. Society urges us to disown that shadow because it can't control what it can't categorize. But your shadow holds the parts of you that don't fit neatly into societal boxes. Your rage, your creativity, your madness, your vision. To exile it is to exile your wholeness. And yet, the world rewards exile. It claps when you perform the version of yourself that fits the mold. You learn to curate your personality, to speak in digestible sound bites, to measure your worth in followers and feedback. But the soul does not thrive in performance. It withers, slowly, silently, until one day you wake up, wildly successful by the world's standards and quietly horrified by how little of you is left. Nietzsche called this herd morality, the dulling of the individual spirit to maintain collective comfort. In his words, he who cannot obey himself will be commanded. And most people never learn to obey themselves because they were never taught how to hear their own voice beneath the noise. They were taught how to fit in, not how to stand alone, how to impress, not how to inquire, how to win, not how to wonder. So here we are, billions of minds living lives they didn't design, reacting to rules they never questioned, chasing goals they don't remember choosing. And the great tragedy? Most will never stop long enough to ask why. But you're not most people. You're still reading. And that means a crack has formed, a fracture in the illusion. You've felt the pressure of the lie. You've glimpsed the truth behind the mask. You're starting to see the edges of the box you were told is the whole world. The unseen consequences. You may not have noticed it happening. Most people don't. That's the terrifying brilliance of it all. The erosion isn't sudden. It doesn't arrive like a wave, crashing into your life and demanding your attention. No, it comes like a soft wind, subtle and constant, brushing against you until the edges of your soul are worn smooth and unrecognizable. You call it growing up. You call it being realistic. But what you're really describing is a slow surrender, a surrender to a system that has never asked for your wholeness, only your usefulness. What happens to a human being when they live this way for too long, when they accept their conditioned role without ever stopping to question it? The consequences aren't loud, and that's what makes them so dangerous. There's no warning siren for the soul. Instead, the symptoms disguise themselves as personality traits. You tell yourself you're just tired, just unmotivated, just bad at focusing. You say you have a short temper, or that you're overly sensitive, or that you're lazy. But these aren't fixed traits. They are spiritual bruises, cognitive scars, signs that sometimes being vital has been neglected. This internal decay expresses itself in quiet tragedies. You find yourself surrounded by people, yet unbearably alone. You achieve your goals only to feel emptier than before. You fill your calendar, but your days feel hollow. You tell yourself you're happy, but you can't remember the last time you felt truly alive. You chase relationships, jobs, recognition, not because you want them, but because you hope they'll finally make you feel real, seen, validated. And that's the cruelest consequence of all. You begin to mistake external validation for internal worth. You don't know who you are unless someone is watching. You perform, not live. You pose, not feel. You measure your days in numbers, followers, income, productivity, but none of it feeds you. None of it touches the part of you that aches for something deeper. You are starving, but not for food, for meaning, for truth, for a life that feels like yours. This emptiness isn't accidental, it's engineered. In a society that thrives on consumption, emptiness is profitable. If you felt whole, you wouldn't need what they're selling. If you trusted your path, you wouldn't buy their maps. If you loved yourself truly and completely, you'd be dangerous, because you wouldn't be controllable. And so, the system keeps you just broken enough to stay compliant, just anxious enough to stay distracted, just insecure enough to keep comparing, competing, conforming. These aren't just poetic observations, they're backed by the mechanics of your own mind. Cognitive biases like confirmation bias and groupthink keep you tethered to the beliefs and behaviors of the majority, even when they hurt you. The status quo bias makes you cling to what's familiar, even when it's destructive. The scarcity mindset, drilled into you since childhood, convinces you there's never enough. Time, love, success, and so you must scramble, hustle, grind. Your brain isn't broken, it's conditioned. It's learned to adapt to a system that doesn't serve your spirit. You've developed coping mechanisms, not convictions. You've built armor, not authenticity. And eventually you forget what's underneath. You become a role, a brand, a persona, until you're no longer sure where the performance ends and the person begins. But the damage doesn't stop at the individual, it ripples outward into the very fabric of society. A culture of disconnected people creates disconnected communities. Shallow minds build shallow systems. When enough people stop thinking for themselves, the world becomes a house of mirrors, each person reflecting the emptiness of the next. Creativity dies, compassion withers, critical thought becomes rebellion. This is how empires of illusion are built, not on lies told from podiums, but on the truths you're too afraid to ask. A population that feels powerless won't resist. A soul that feels alone won't rise. And so the system survives, not through oppression, but through consent. Your silence is its lifeblood. And yet the human psyche was never designed for this. It longs for more than safety. It yearns for depth. Even when you've buried it under years of routine and repression, something within you still whispers in moments of quiet. It stirs when you hear an honest piece of music, or stand under a sky that reminds you how small you really are. It trembles when you love deeply, when you cry unexpectedly, when you laugh without explanation. That's the part of you that remains untouched, the part society couldn't reach, the part that remembers. But memory alone isn't enough. Awareness without action becomes torment. You've seen behind the curtain now. You can no longer pretend you don't feel the pull. The question is, what will you do with it? Because here's the truth. If you don't take your life back, someone else will live it for you. If you don't reclaim your mind, it will be rented out to the highest bidder. You will be reduced to a consumer of pre-packaged identities, a cog in a machine that needs you to forget your divinity. And make no mistake, your mind is divine. Not in the religious sense, but in its depth, its complexity, its ability to imagine and destroy and rebuild. Your consciousness is not a product, it's not a brand, it's not content to be optimized, it's a force. And if you don't learn to wield it, someone will weaponize it against you. So now you know the cost of not thinking for yourself, the erosion of your truth, the commodification of your soul, the slow death of your originality. And yet, this realization is not a curse. It's a doorway, a fracture in the wall, a whisper in the dark that says, there's more. You can feel it, can't you? Good, because the next step is not to despair. The next step is to rebel. The rebellion. How to break free. There comes a moment, quiet and sharp, when the illusion begins to rot from the inside. It's not dramatic. There's no explosion, no applause, just a silence that tastes different. You wake up and everything looks the same, but feels wrong. The clothes you wear suddenly feel like costumes. The conversations you've memorized now sound like static. Even your smile, once automatic, pauses at the edge of your lips, unsure if it still belongs to you. That's how rebellion begins. Not with fire, with awareness. And once you've seen it, really seen it, you can't unsee it. You start to realize that the rebellion society fears most is not violent. It's not revolution in the streets or banners in the sky. It's the quiet individual who dares to be real, the person who stops outsourcing their thoughts, who chooses stillness over speed, who chooses depth over performance, who walks away from the script, not in anger, but in clarity. That kind of person can't be manipulated. They don't need approval. They're not trying to win a game they didn't choose to play. That kind of person becomes dangerous, not to people, but to systems. So what does rebellion look like in a world that profits from your conformity? It begins with one sacred act, thinking your own thoughts. It sounds simple, almost absurdly so, but few people ever do it. Most thoughts are inherited, regurgitated, recycled. We echo the voices that shaped us, parents, media, influencers, institutions, without ever asking, do I believe this, or was I trained to? True rebellion begins when you ask that question about everything: success, love, failure, gender, God, money, power. It begins when you stop defaulting to the popular answer and start sitting with the discomfort of your own. And yes, it will be uncomfortable, because real thinking is dangerous. It kills the versions of you that were built for applause. It exposes the parts of you that have been asleep. Next comes the confrontation of your shadow. Jung called it the dark side of the psyche, but not in the moral sense. The shadow contains all that you've rejected about yourself: the rage, the lust, the grief, the madness, but also your passion, your power, your truth. Society tells you to hide these parts, to present only the sanitized self. But wholeness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from integration. You must walk into your own darkness, not to destroy it, but to listen. There is wisdom there. There is freedom. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Once you've begun to think for yourself and reclaim your inner world, you must take the next radical step. Live differently, not perform difference, not curate a countercultural image, but actually live in a way that reflects your truth. That might mean leaving a job that drains your soul, ending relationships that feed your persona but starve your essence. It might mean spending more time in silence, creating art that no one understands, saying no to what everyone else worships, saying yes to what scares you but feels right. This is the rebellion. It doesn't always look like a fight. Sometimes it looks like planting your feet in the soil of your own life and saying, "I will not move unless it's true." Sometimes it looks like weeping, finally, after years of holding it all in. Sometimes it looks like laughing too loudly in a world that fears joy without permission. This kind of rebellion can't be packaged. It can't be monetized. It's raw, messy, real. And that's why it terrifies a world addicted to control. But don't mistake rebellion for isolation. This path is not walked alone. You'll begin to notice others, people who have stepped off the path, who carry a quiet fire in their eyes. Seek them out. Build with them. Not empires, but sanctuaries. Not movements, but mirrors. People who don't try to fix you, but see you. Who don't need you to perform, but invite you to unfold. Because the true rebellion isn't about being against the world. It's about being for something deeper, something timeless, something alive. Read the forgotten philosophers. Write poetry no one will read. Walk without a destination. Speak what trembles on your tongue. Question everything, especially yourself. Turn your wounds into thresholds. Turn your longing into a compass. And when fear rises, as it will, know this: it is not a stop sign. It is a gate. Behind fear lives freedom, but only if you walk through it. History remembers the rebels who made noise, but the ones who truly changed the world. They whispered first. They whispered truth to their own minds when everyone else was shouting lies. They whispered love to their own brokenness when everyone else offered distraction. They whispered no more to the part of themselves that had been trained to shrink. So whisper now. Begin the rebellion within, because you're not crazy, you're not broken, you're waking up. And everything in this world that is real and beautiful and lasting begins there, in the moment a person decides to wake up and stay awake. But rebellion isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a deeper one. Because once you've stripped away the noise, once you've walked into your shadow, once you've tasted the rawness of your own truth, then comes the final question. If you are no longer what the world made you, then who are you now? That's where we go next. The ultimate truth. The final, most powerful realization. What if the ultimate act of rebellion isn't defiance, but remembrance? Not remembering facts or identities, but something older, something sacred. A memory buried beneath the noise, the programming, the years of pretending. A memory of who you were before the world told you who to be. Imagine standing at the edge of your inner world, staring down at the quiet truth, waiting like a stranger who never stopped loving you. The one you abandoned to fit in. The one who still watches through your eyes when you stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering why everything feels off, even when it all looks successful. Let that question land heavy in your chest. Who were you before the world got to you? Before the masks, before the strategies, before the survival mechanisms kicked in and called themselves personality? Before you performed happiness, before you translated pain into productivity, before you confused attention for love. Here's the truth most people never realize. You were whole before you were broken, and you still are beneath the cracks. The world doesn't want you to remember this, because a person who knows they are whole can no longer be bought, no longer manipulated, no longer controlled by the need to prove anything. That kind of person becomes sovereign, that kind of person becomes free. But true freedom isn't the absence of rules, it isn't chaos, it isn't escape. It's the return to an inner authority, a knowing that doesn't need validation to be true. This is what philosophers like Viktor Frankl and Carl Jung were pointing toward all along, that meaning is not given to you. It is revealed by you. And that revelation comes not when you chase the light, but when you walk through your own darkness and emerge with your soul intact. Imagine waking up and not reaching for your phone, not because you're trying to be disciplined, but because the urge to distract yourself is simply gone. Imagine being in a room full of people and not adjusting who you are to match the energy, not shrinking, not inflating, just being, not performing. Imagine making a choice, any choice, and knowing with a calm certainty that it came from the deepest part of you, not from fear, not from habit, not from what someone on a screen once said was smart. That's the level of inner alignment that looks like magic from the outside, but it's not magic. It's memory. You remembered yourself. This is the truth. You are not your programming. You are not the voice in your head that repeats old fears in your father's tone. You are not the scars that shaped your choices, nor the mask that kept you safe. You are the awareness behind all of it. The watcher, the witness, the one who has always been there, quietly noticing, waiting for the moment you'd stop chasing versions of yourself and finally sit still long enough to meet the real one. That real self is not perfect. It is wild. It is wounded. It is radiant. It is terrifying in its honesty, and it is enough. The final realization, the one that changes everything, is not that the system is broken. It's that the system was never designed to reflect your truth in the first place. It was built to survive, not to liberate. But you were born to liberate, not the world, yourself. And through that liberation, the world begins to change, not by force but by frequency. One awakened life is a disruption, a ripple in the fabric of the ordinary. So what do you do now? You live, not as a concept, not as a brand, not as a strategy. You live as an act of rebellion. You walk slowly. You speak truth, even when your voice shakes. You choose beauty over efficiency, presence over productivity. You cry when it hurts. You laugh when it doesn't make sense. You rest when you're tired, not as a reward, but as a right. You stop apologizing for your depth. You stop shrinking around people who fear it. You grieve what you lost, and you celebrate what you're finding. You will lose things. People, comfort, identity, and it will hurt. But what you gain, that is beyond language. You will begin to feel real, and in that realness you will touch something eternal. Call it God, soul, spirit, source. It doesn't matter. You'll know it by the way it silences your fear. You'll know it by the way it feels like home. That's the moment you realize something so quietly profound, it doesn't even need to be spoken. You were never lost. You were only waiting to return. So here, at the end of the illusion, what remains? You. Not the version trained to survive. Not the persona shaped to be liked. But you. The raw, trembling, holy fire of a human being who has finally come home. And from this place, you don't just live. You create. You heal. You become. Not because society told you to, but because now you finally want to.